dance for joy or loss.
So welcome to Sensible Secondhand Classics, or in this case, not very sensible secondhand classics. The series where we usually look at nostalgic cars you can buy, but are sensible and practical for a budget of between £1,000 and £5,000. In this case, however, this is a Mark I 2003 Skoda Octavia vRS, and it's not particularly sensible at all, or is it? So the Mark I Skoda Octavia was released in this country in 1998. It was released in some parts of the world as early as 1996, and officially it continued till 2004 when it was replaced by the Mark II. But actually the VRS version like this continued until 2005, and some of the estates I think were imported in this country as late as about 2010. There were lots of engines available with the Mark I Skoda Octavia. The ones I would not recommend are probably the ones right at the bottom. Very briefly, there was a 75 horsepower 1.6 available that was also shared with the Skoda Felicia and also the Volkswagen Golf Mark III. That was replaced when the car was facelifted in 2000 with a 1.4 with the same power output, 75 horsepower. They're only available in the sort of bottom of the range, the LXI or later the classic models, and with 0 to 60 time of almost 15 seconds. Yeah, not the best really. I used to have an engine in a Mark I Leon I owned years ago, and it was alright, but there are better engines available. One of the most sensible choices is probably the 1.6, which either had 101 or later with a face of 102 horsepower. You could also go for a very short-lived non-turbo version of the engine that's in this car, which had 125 horsepower. It was only available in the SLXI model for about a year, I think. 98, 99 was about it. Then there's the probably best choice for lots of people, the 2 litre that came in 99 with 115 horsepower. Then a bit more exciting, the 1.8 turbo derivative of the engine that's in this car, 150 horsepower, and then the rip snorting VRS like this one, 180 horsepower. There are also some diesels available, but as usual, due to controversial government legislation and all kinds of other reasons, we don't talk about diesels on this channel. We do talk about is the fact that this VRS does feel like it wants to go, especially with this car that's had a modified exhaust and modified suspension put on it. Really, the roads that you should be driving a VRS on are not necessarily roads like the one that I'm on, which is a sort of urban road in Bristol. But this is just sometimes the way that it goes in terms of driving cars in a local area. The suspension is probably a little bit too firm for somebody like me. They weren't actually, from what I understand, as firm as other cars when they were new and unmodified. But if you really want the ultimate in handling, then you can change a lot of the parts on these. Obviously underneath this car is just a Volkswagen Golf, and so, you know, the aftermarket scene for these is very, very strong. But just in terms of the general experience, it's actually quite quiet and refined in here, really, even though I've got the big exhaust and the modified suspension. And that's just a sort of general thing about the way that these cars were. The Octavia was a massive improvement on virtually any other Skoda model that had been before. The nearest equivalent would be the Felicia that came out just before it, about 1995, and replaced the Favorit. The Felicia was essentially just kind of like an improved Favorit, and that still had the engine option, which Skoda had first introduced in around 1964. Various examples of that engine continued right away until about 2004. That engine was actually in some of the non-UK market Octavias, but the Felicia actually came with a 1.6 Volkswagen engine as well, and that same engine was in some of the early ones of these. So more and more influence creeping in, and I think actually made it into a better car. Do apologise for the background noise, viewers. So this is a car that's been modified a little bit. You would have thought perhaps it's not necessary to change bits on one of these because it's fast enough as it is, but a lot of people like to personalise their cars. This one's certainly been personalised with the exhaust. If we look inside as well, see this enormous boot, about 500 litres I think they are on these cars. A lot of it is filled with this enormous amplifier. So if you want to have your music and you also want to be able to fit everything else in and have a performance car, then a Mark 1 vRS might be for you. Suspension as well has been modified a bit. There's the latches. For some reason these latches do seem to be a bit problematic on these cars, both the estate and the hatch. So the paint has faded a bit, but this is because the car was in someone's garden for something like 10 years before Jay bought it, and he got it actually at a very reasonable price. It's done about 145,000 miles, so it's not in the first flush of youth, and obviously, you know, some of the paint's faded and plastics are faded, but it's actually looking very bright on camera. The camera's making it look actually a bit brighter than it is. It's a bit of a sort of lighter yellow in reality. The wheels obviously are aftermarket on this car. One thing that Jay has told me is actually this is a 5-speed rather than a 6-speed gearbox. I was under the impression with these that they got 6-speed. There we go. Actually, it's just a 5-speed. I've worn off a bit. I've seen loads of the Volkswagen Group products from this era with worn gear knobs like this, and this is no exception. So we've got parking sensors in this car. We got actually dual zone climate control, which I was quite surprised about. It's showing 2 different temperatures, so it's dual zone. It would have had a sort of double DIN unit, I think, originally in here, but that's been changed out for a more modern system with Bluetooth. One thing I always found strange with these Mark 1 Octavias is the fact that they have the name of the car written under the hazard switch. I don't know what that says about Skoda reliability, but there we go. These things sometimes crack. See the door cards a little bit fading. Headlining is good actually in this. So yeah, 143 or 145,000 miles. This steering wheel is I think unique to the vRS. The lesser models had a different one. And we can see actually bits of the carpet and the seat are actually different colours. Traction control is there. That's for the fuel flap release, which is unusual for a Volkswagen product actually. But we see familiar things in here like the interior door handles, the headlamp switch was in about 1 million other Volkswagens, and good old Volkswagen Group electric mirror switch. I think it's exactly the same as the one in my Mark 4 Seat Toledo. So we've got all round electric windows, which wasn't at all standard in all the Octavias. Powered door locks and everything. We've got sports pedals in here. I think actually these got them as standard. So we look in here, we can see we've got in terms of the ashtray, which for some reason doesn't feel as nice as it should do. Also, I think the cigarette lighter is back here. Yes, it is. It's just there. And we've got a little sort of cup holder type thing here as well. I don't remember that from the one that I sort of used to drive very briefly about 11 years ago. Door pockets look quite big. I'll get the sticker emission documents out in a bit, and we'll have a look to see if they go in. I prefer a lighter headlining myself, but the thing about these vRS, they've always come with a dark headlining. Mark 2s are the same. I think the Mark 3 and 4 might be the same as well. Do they still make a vRS Octavia? I can't actually remember now, viewers. I know they made the 2 and the 3. Don't know about the 4. But yeah, seats are sort of half leather. They're quite comfortable, and they're actually embossed very slightly, where you can just about see you embossed with the V logo for some reason. I can't remember why, but in 2002 they had to change the name of the car from the RS to the vRS. Probably Ford got a bit annoyed about it or something. That's probably what happened. Anyway, let's get in the back, shall we? So, family car status of a vRS. Yeah, pretty good. Not quite as capacious on the back seat area as something like a Mondeo, and that's because one of these is actually based on the Mark IV Golf floor pan, not the Passat platform, and the wheelbase is a little bit sort of shorter than you'd have in, say, I don't know, a Vectra C at this time, or a Mondeo. Good old beaded seat cover. These cars are known to do really, really high mileages. And obviously some of them would have beaded seat covers on them because they'd be driven around by people who drive professionally. I know one of them, for example, that was on the Car Throttle channel a few years ago, had done, I think, over 500,000 miles. So yeah, you know, just typical kind of Volkswagen Group interior of the time, switches and handles, door pockets, which is very good to see. I like seeing rear door pockets, and 2 matte pockets on either side, which is good. A little ashtray here, and a cup holder, which is clever. No rear armrest. You know, the sort of Mark 1 Octavia I prefer is the Lauren and Clement. I think those are very, very nice. You know, some of you are more of a sporty persuasion, which is why this is not very sensible second-hand classics. Yeah. Right, let's look at the bonnet, which makes this Octavia vRS special. So here we have the 1.8 20 valve turbo engine generating around 180 horsepower. This one might have been a little bit briefed on, not exactly sure. We actually see here it's got an Audi logo on it because, well, this engine was also used in things like the Mark 1 Audi TT very successfully. They do have a cam belt, so just be aware of that, and it's not the most accessible engine bay I've ever seen. The gearbox is barely visible, for example. Good old Volkswagen Group coolant reservoir from the dawn of time, essentially. And you know, those of you who are into, you know, Volkswagen parts spotting will spot the oil filler cap and things like that. But yeah, I like the way that the headlights have obviously been replaced at some stage of these clear ones. I think the facelift on these was quite successful. The pre-facelift cars don't look nearly as good, but of course all the VRSs, in this country anyway, were post-facelift. Facelifts were echoed around 2000 and the VRSs started in 2001. Right, let's go for another drive, shall we? Lloyd Young Consulting stickers, t-shirts and mugs are available by clicking the link to the Google form in the video description below. So the other driver's impression is not one of kind of incredibly heavy clutch and sort of stripped out interior. It's more one of sort of refinement and good engineering. Certainly these cars are now getting on for 25 years old in some of the earliest examples, and so there are things that go wrong with them. Throttle bodies can get gunked up, some of the electrics can go funny, the door seals can be a bit weird on these, tailgate latches. With this engine you've got to make sure the cam belt's been done, sometimes they leak oil. But for about £2,000, which is where these cars sort of start for a, not a pristine example of an MOT. That doesn't sound like a lot of money for all this space and this sort of level of luxury and this level of performance. 0 to 60 in this car takes 7.6 seconds. I thought actually that these came with a 6-speed manual, but driving this today, it's definitely a 5-speed. You go for 6 if you want, but there's no gear there. Yeah, I've quite enjoyed this kind of, unfortunately, a little bit limited test drive. It's just because of traffic and the distance from where Jay lives or whatever else, I've had to sort of limit it. But well, I'm really quite impressed. I'm quite happy with this. I still think a 1.8 turbo or a 2-litre Lauren and Clement model would suit me better than one of these, but everyone's different, aren't they? The other thing I must say is that actually the 1.8 turbo Elegance was available with 4-wheel drive, which is unusual. You'd think 4-wheel drive would be used on the performance version, but for some reason that was the only one that marketed both in the States and the hatchback form. Rather like the VRS, that actually came as the States as well as this hatchback, well, that came a little bit later on, about 2003 or so. Let's now look at some Skoda Octavia Mark I trim levels. When the car was launched in this country in 1998, the trim levels were LXI, GLXI, and then later there was an SLXI. The interesting ones didn't come until a little bit later on. When the car was facelifted in the year 2000, those trim levels were replaced with Classic, Ambient and Elegance. Later on there was a Lauren and Clement, which is the most luxurious Octavia, my preference of course. Towards the end of production there were some special editions. The Blue Line and Silver Line were only made in 2003, and then the Ambient SE came along in 2004. The VRS actually was made later than the rest of the Mark I Octavias, apart from the Estate, which continued in production in some areas until about 2011. I've seen some really late Mark I Octavia Estates, like sort of 09 and 010 plates. The documentation that I've seen suggests they weren't marketed over here, but I don't know what they're doing over here then. It's a bit strange. So other parts of the world they continued. The car was actually made in quite a few different places, in addition to the Czech Republic, Poland, Bosnia, India, Ukraine and Kazakhstan for some reason. The number of cars on this Mark IV Golf platform is insane. In addition to the Octavia and the Golf itself, the Audi A3, the Seat Leon, the Seat Toledo, the Audi TT, the Volkswagen Bora and the Volkswagen Beetle. There are also some other cars that were made in other parts of the world, like China, that are based on this platform too, but we won't cover those here because that's quite enough. So viewers, should you buy a Skoda Octavia Mark I VRS for your hard-earned budget of between £1,000 and £5,000? Well, this is just a little bit too kind of firm and extrovert for somebody like me. I'm the sort of more Lauren and Clement type person. But yeah, it's not a fearsome, difficult car to drive this. It's actually got a sort of character that's quite easygoing, but if you want to go fast, but you certainly can, and the chassis feels really solid too. So it's very much sort of up to you which Mark I Octavia you prefer, but there's a choice up there for everybody. Anyway, thank you so much indeed once again for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video and comment below, and we shall see you again soon for more, not particularly sensible, but reasonably priced motoring.
Excellent.